The year was 1970, and a great catastrophe had left Japan's capital in smoldering ruins, its broken tower standing as a lone silhouette against a sky choked with fire. An ominous silence fell over Tokyo, where the silhouette of its famed tower stood starkly against a sky choked with glowing embers. That ominous silence was shattered by a ground-shaking rumble, as down in the ravaged streets, three uniformed figures desperately unleashed glowing magic against the colossal monster setting the city ablaze. Silhouetted against a blazing inferno, the furious Commander Minato thrust his hand forward, unleashing his soldiers with the command to fire at will. It began with a deafening roar, as a massive explosion ripped through the sky and engulfed the world in a blinding, white-hot light. It started with a sky of fire, as a storm of glowing embers consumed the heavens in an oppressive, reddish-orange haze. With an ominous boom that rippled through the fiery smoke, a colossal, monstrous entity emerged, its glowing red eyes and prominent purple gems staring down at an unseen witness who could only stammer in disbelief that this couldn't be happening. Bathed in the fiery glow of the aftermath, a group of soldiers could only stare in stunned disbelief as Minato observed that their target remained completely without a scratch. A series of thunderous impacts shattered the city's quiet night, each one unleashing a colossal pillar of fire and smoke that tore violently into the crimson sky. Against a sky ablaze with apocalyptic fire, three colossal horned figures emerged from a cloud of smoke, their menacing silhouettes ushering in an era of dread. Amidst the fiery chaos, a lone soldier's resolve shattered, his voice trembling with the despairing cry that they were all done for. The air itself ignited in a violent, crimson explosion, unleashing a torrent of raw power that screamed through the void. The screaming torrent of power solidified into a monstrous, multi-eyed insectoid creature, roaring silently from within the heart of the inferno. In the next instant, the creature detonated in a cataclysmic explosion, its silent roar finally erupting into a deafening blast that tore outwards. It began with a cataclysmic explosion, as a torrent of golden-orange energy surged upward, bathing the world in a brief, violent dawn. A sudden, cataclysmic blast of fire and energy tore across the battlefield, forcing a strained Minato and his soldiers to brace themselves against the searing onslaught. In a maelstrom of dust and debris, a powerful shockwave slammed into three young soldiers, forcing them to recoil while a determined Minato held his ground and braced against the violent impact. It began in a formless void, where ethereal energies of soft pink and beige first stirred, coalescing into the genesis of a new world. With a resonant boom, those energies solidified to reveal a man named Minato, who stood at the center of the storm with one hand raised, confidently commanding the swirling chaos of purple and red magic. The rigid formation of young soldiers shattered in an instant, their faces a mask of collective shock as one of them stammered in disbelief at the identity of the figure standing before them. A calm voice then cut through their stunned silence, offering a simple yet powerful commendation that they had done well. It began with a single, confident glance, as the white-haired protagonist, Minato, looked back with a knowing smirk, his very presence radiating a subtle yet powerful aura. That self-assured smirk, however, seemed to shatter the resolve of three young soldiers, who broke down in a wave of overwhelming grief. In the heart of a crimson maelstrom, the white-haired Minato stood as the unwavering center, commanding his allies to fall back and leave the fight to him. That unwavering confidence shattered in an instant, his voice breaking as he screamed for a desperate, full-scale retreat. In a fit of fury, Minato seized the officer by the collar, demanding to know how he could be so foolish as to order a retreat while abandoning the first of his kind, the greatest mage of all time. A tense silence was shattered by a young soldier's gasp, his face slick with sweat as he stammered in disbelief, questioning if the figure before him was truly the legendary Minato Ichikami. Tears of pure joy streamed down the face of a young man in a formal uniform, his voice choked with emotion as he sobbed out a confirmation that it was him. In a world consumed by fire, the air hung thick and heavy, choked with rising smoke as countless embers glowed dimly in the oppressive darkness. Amidst a raging inferno of smoke and crimson light, the white-haired man named Minato stood as a figure of pure defiance, his eyes glowing with a powerful violet energy. Amidst a fiery hellscape filled with the screeching and growling of monstrous shadows, Minato stood as a lone beacon of defiance, his body crackling with untamed purple energy. It began in an oppressive darkness, where the only sound was the faint crackle of dying embers and the only sight was a pair of intense, glowing orange eyes watching from the shadows. The air split with a thunderous rush as a grotesque, multi-eyed beast lunged from the chaos, wreathed in a maelstrom of fire. Engulfed in a vibrant torrent of purple magic and orange flames, Minato moved with supreme confidence, dismissing his unseen opponent as far too slow. In the heart of a swirling, chaotic void, a brilliant slash of fiery energy tore through the emptiness, manifesting as a colossal talon descending upon an unseen target. Meeting the colossal threat without hesitation, Minato thrust his hand forward, unleashing a brilliant, concentrated blast of purple energy to intercept the descending talon. It began with a cataclysmic surge of power, as lances of pure violet energy descended from the heavens to meet a furious storm of rising embers. Their impact sent a devastating shockwave of purple energy tearing through the collapsing city, shattering everything in its path with a deafening roar. The battle ignited in a cataclysmic explosion of violet power, instantly obscuring the combatants in a blinding storm of raw energy. The violent energy then twitched uncontrollably, as streaks of fiery orange erupted through the violet haze, overwhelming the landscape in a chaotic spasm of power. Deep within a swirling, fiery chaos, a monstrous entity began to stir, its gem-encrusted form twitching as a torrent of raw power erupted around it. With a sly smile and a casual flick of his fingers, the charismatic, white-haired Minato effortlessly summoned a vibrant magical aura that pulsed with unspoken power. As a monstrous roar echoed through a vortex of raw, fiery energy, Minato stood as their master, his form silhouetted by the glowing, dragon-like beasts materializing around him. In an instant, their collective power erupted into a maelstrom of fire and shadow, casting embers upward through a thick cloud of smoke. The age of peace was shattered in an instant, for one day, under a sky that burned like embers, a vast number of demons appeared all over the world. The sky burned red as horned monsters descended upon the city, a terrifying invasion witnessed by the helpless people below, an event that would be forever known as a calamity. In an age of fire and ruin, humanity's desperate last stand against the colossal demons began with the bitter realization that their modern weapons were utterly futile. With a figure plummeting from the shattered remains of a structure and a desperate hand grasping at empty air, it was in that heart-stopping moment of failure that they realized magic was the only answer. With intense concentration, Minato and his two comrades unleashed their powerful magic, knowing it was the only way to defeat the demons. The brutal 10-year war between humans and demons culminated in a storm of raw power, as Minato and his allies summoned a colossal feathered beast from a tempest of glowing magic. A cataclysmic explosion shattered the darkness, painting the air with violent streaks of fiery light and coiling smoke. The world had known only a tense quiet for generations, a fragile state that was finally shattered in a cataclysmic explosion of brilliant, raw power. A vortex of raw, mystical power erupted around the white-haired protagonist, Minato, whose confident stance defied the chaotic energy swirling at his command. From a chaotic inferno of fire and embers, the legend of one man emerged, Minato Ichikami, the first and strongest mage in existence. In a hellscape of fire and shadow, a lone warrior named Minato emerged, his body wreathed in a purple aura as a silent declaration that he was the only one who could save the world. His declaration was met by a violent eruption of reddish-pink energy from the ground, scattering golden sparks through the oppressive darkness. As the unspoken question hung in the air, a sudden, critical realization struck Minato, his thoughts igniting against a backdrop of fiery intensity. Within a maelstrom of crimson lightning and crackling power, Minato serenely embraced the torrent of golden energy enveloping him, his form beginning to merge with the colossal, armored dragon taking shape from the light. Surrounded by a mystical pink aura, Minato's eyes widened in dawning horror as he realized he was facing the demon god. Gazing up into an overwhelming, ethereal light, the white-haired swordsman Minato finally understood the immense power before him, recognizing it as the top-tier demon and the final boss of the calamity. The air itself seemed to shatter as a colossal surge of orange and red magical energy exploded into being, its immense power striking an unseen witness with overwhelming awe. Without warning, a cataclysmic surge of power erupted, tearing through the air in a maelstrom of crackling red and yellow energy. It began with a deafening buzz of raw energy, as a monstrous being materialized from thin air, its fanged mouth crackling with a terrifying yellow light. Surrounded by a violent surge of crackling energy, the white-haired warrior Minato grit his teeth, feeling the immense strain as he realized he was almost at his limit. In a sudden, blinding flash of power, a magical circle erupted before Minato, unleashing a magnificent winged entity whose golden aura tore through the air with a deafening swoosh. A deafening hum erupted from the ground as Minato, his armored boots planted firm, unleashed a blinding surge of golden energy from a complex sigil etched into the earth. The battlefield erupted in a blinding flash of golden energy, throwing a stunned Minato to the ground in a deafening blast. The world then dissolved into a searing white void, crisscrossed by the crackling aftershocks of golden energy. The battle erupted in a blinding flash of power, catching the cloaked figure of Minato mid-air within a glowing green magic circle as a colossal energy beam tore through the space beside him. It then surged forward with an immense whoosh, a crackling torrent of yellow lightning tearing through the air. In a blinding flash, the very air ignited with a terrifying surge of power, a chaotic maelstrom that could only be the sudden manifestation of legendary 14th-tier magic. Caught within that fiery maelstrom, Minato stared in disbelief, wondering why his opponent would unleash their full power from the very beginning. Amidst a swirling vortex of arcane sigils, a terrifying spectral face roared into existence, its mouth agape and blazing with raw, purple power. It began with a deafening roar as a chaotic maelstrom of vibrant, multicolored energy tore through the silence, erupting from a single, blinding point. The air crackled with an impossible power, forcing Minato to question in sheer disbelief if what he was witnessing was the legendary six-element fusion magic. With a look of fierce determination, Minato extended his hand, unleashing a torrent of brilliant green and yellow energy that filled the space around him. With a surge of raw power that sent stone blocks tumbling through the air, Minato ascended amidst a blinding light, his green cloak whipping around him as thorny, glowing vines erupted from below. The silence of the void was shattered by a deafening buzz as a brilliant surge of energy erupted from the darkness. It began with a blinding flash, as overwhelming power erupted around Minato, consuming him in a maelstrom of brilliant light and crackling pink energy. With a guttural roar that ripped through the chaos, the white-haired warrior Minato unleashed a maelstrom of crackling purple and golden energy, his body trembling under the immense strain. In a violent instant, the air itself shattered with a deafening slam, unleashing a chaotic storm of arcane power. The world fractured in a silent, brilliant detonation, a kaleidoscopic burst of yellow, purple, and green energy announcing a clash of unimaginable power. The air itself seemed to crackle as Minato, his expression a portrait of fierce concentration, channeled a torrent of vibrant, multicolored energy through his outstretched hands. A split second later, the concentrated power detonated in a thunderous explosion, sending streaks of fiery energy screaming into the sky. In a cataclysmic eruption of pure force, a blinding wave of golden energy tore through the darkness, signaling an event of immense power. The resulting wave of light flooded the city streets, casting the buildings into stark silhouette against a sky ablaze with glowing particles as a solitary Minato watched in silent awe from the heart of the spectacle. The world erupted in a storm of fire and electrical fury, yet through the heart of the cataclysm, Minato descended with unyielding determination. In a dizzying blur of motion against a stark red void, Minato was flung end over end, his white hair a stark contrast to the chaos. A sickening thud echoed through the fiery chaos as Minato was violently thrown back, blood streaking his face while a shadowy figure watched from above. With a deep, resonant hum, a malevolent spear of red and purple energy erupted from the darkness, scattering golden motes into the air. Kneeling within a swirling vortex of divine energy, Minato could only stare in awe as a magnificent winged figure manifested before him, radiating an overwhelming light. Within a storm of dark fire and glowing embers, the overwhelming strength pressing down on him crystallized into a single, terrifying thought: this was the might of the demon god. In a sudden, blinding flare of golden energy, the injured Minato staggered back, a pained grimace twisting his features as he lost his balance. As a deafening surge of crimson energy erupted from below, Minato confronted the despairing realization that he could not possibly win at this rate. In a moment of intense concentration, a formidable, fiery entity began to manifest behind Minato, its immense power coalescing into a single, glowing purple gem on his forehead. As the entity's power settled upon him, his expression hardened with the grim realization that he was left with no other choice. The air itself seemed to shatter as a brilliant torrent of blue energy erupted, yet at its heart, a white-haired man named Minato stood with serene composure, untouched by the storm of his own making. That storm then intensified with a deafening crackle, its blue essence now surging with chaotic red arcs in a blinding flash of power. It began with a cataclysmic surge of power, a vibrant storm of red, pink, and blue energy that tore through the silence with incandescent lightning. With focused intent, Minato's hand became the epicenter of whirring blue magic circles, the air humming with arcane power as he explained that a spell's very strength is determined by its tier. As countless blue magic circles bloomed around him, the white-haired mage Minato began his explanation, stating that a spell's tier is determined simply by the number of these very circles. Amidst a blinding surge of power that filled the air with a deafening roar, Minato stood enveloped by countless glowing blue circles, calmly declaring that he knew the demon god possessed exactly 14. Against the dark, star-filled void, the powerful magic user Minato began his incantation, his hand rising to summon a cascade of whirring, intricate cyan magic circles that radiated with immense power. A maelstrom of blue energy and arcane runes erupted around the white-haired youth, Minato, who declared with cold resolve that he possessed 15. The air vibrated with a heavy thump as a ghostly hand, glowing with intense blue energy, descended with focused and devastating power. The silent, starry expanse was torn asunder as a voice invoked a cataclysmic 15th tier spell, unleashing the brilliant blue energy of innocent void. That unleashed power erupted in a blinding flash, a torrent of turquoise energy and crackling white lightning that consumed everything in its path. It began in a blinding explosion of light, as raw, white energy tore through a vibrant blue expanse, crackling with untamed power. In the silent abyss, a grand, multi-tiered structure materialized, crackling with an ethereal blue power that pulsed with ancient and formidable energy. Overwhelmed, the blue-haired woman was swept away by a powerful torrent of glowing aqua energy that erupted in a draconic form. The very fabric of reality seemed to tear as a brilliant surge of ethereal blue energy erupted, its crackling tendrils of power heralding an event of cataclysmic proportions. It began within a silent void, where ethereal light particles danced amid streaks of pure, untamed energy. It began not with a sound, but with a silent bloom of ethereal blue light, filling the void with a profound sense of calm. The journey begins across a vast and silent expanse, where the sun flares over a cracked plain stretching towards a distant, serene skyline. In the heart of a desolate wasteland, the ground suddenly cracked and crumbled, birthing an ornate, otherworldly object that bathed the barren earth in a mysterious, vibrant glow. A violent thump shattered the silence of the desolate plains as Minato crashed into the earth, his tattered, wing-like cloak splaying out amidst a plume of rising dust. Lying amidst the fading glow of his victory, Minato realized with exhausted relief that defeating the final boss and ending the calamity had consumed every last shred of his magic. As his life ebbed away, the man known as the Great Sage found solace in his title, accepting that it was not a bad way to die. In the quiet stillness of his final moments, Minato lay looking upwards, a sense of peace washing over him as he reflected that it had been a good life. Silence hung heavy in the air as a profound, unspoken thought began to glimmer in Minato's mind. The world awoke to a vast, ethereal sky, where wispy clouds parted around the gentle arc of a shimmering rainbow. In a boundless expanse of pure, radiant light, the white-haired Minato drifted through a serene and dreamlike unconsciousness. The air itself seemed to shatter as Minato, his form nearly consumed by the light, unleashed a massive, shimmering burst of raw power. In an ethereal silence, the unconscious form of Minato lay still as a vibrant, golden energy began to manifest in the air, floating weightlessly above him. It began with a blinding flash, as an unknown power erupted from below with a deafening roar that tore through the silence. A devastating wave of golden energy tore across the field, overwhelming Minato in a brilliant flash and sending him crashing amidst the explosive fallout. The fight began in a blinding instant, as a devastating pillar of golden energy erupted from the heavens to incinerate the ground below. It began with a blinding light in the sky, from which a strange geometric structure descended with impossible speed, tearing through the heavens in a silent, earth-shattering arrival. It began with a deafening roar and a violent shudder that sent the entire structure hurtling through a disorienting blur of motion. In the heart of the conflict, a brilliant, star-shaped explosion of raw power suddenly erupted, signaling that the true fight had only just begun. As Minato rested in bed, a dormant power deep within him violently awakened, erupting from his chest in a brilliant torrent of golden-orange energy. In the silent aftermath, a sudden, violent torrent of fiery energy erupted from the chest of the unconscious Minato, bathing the scene in a dangerous glow. As the heavily bandaged Minato lay still in his sickbed, a mysterious and overwhelming power suddenly surged forth, erupting from his body in a blinding flash of light. In a quiet hospital room, the still form of Minato lay wrapped in bandages, a silent testament to the battle he had barely survived. In the heavy stillness that had settled over the room, the first sign of life was a faint twitch from Minato's hand as it rested upon the white sheets. Reacting with sudden shock to something unseen, Minato sprang into action, his body lunging forward in a blur. Consciousness returned to Minato in a disorienting haze, his hands gripping unfamiliar white sheets as he wondered how he could possibly be alive after exhausting every last bit of his magic. A wave of confusion washed over Minato as he stood in a sterile hospital room, looking down at a mysterious figure completely covered by a sheet and wondering just what was going on. A chilling realization washed over the bandaged young man, Minato, whose outstretched hand trembled as he refused to believe what was happening. His trembling hand finally steadied into an accusatory point, his voice shaking with rage as he demanded to know just who the hell this person was. Consciousness returned not with a sound, but as a slow, unfocused drift through textures of brown and beige. The unfocused drift through colors and shapes gradually resolved, sharpening into the clear, stark sight of a nameplate on the wall, Minato Kusanagi. Lost in thought before a hospital sink, Mr. Kusanagi's quiet morning was interrupted by a doctor and a nurse who formally requested his attention from the doorway. It was in the unforgiving glare of a bathroom mirror that Minato first saw the extent of the damage, his own shocked, bandaged face staring back like that of a stranger. Moments later, he lay on a hospital bed, passively enduring an examination from a doctor and nurse as his attention drifted to the silent broadcast of a man in a suit on a nearby television. In the sterile quiet of the medical office, a man and his colleague, Mizuhara, reeled back in shared disbelief, questioning how the results before them could possibly be real. The tense silence was shattered by an incredulous shout, revealing the impossible truth that the person before them had been in critical condition from a car accident but now seemed as if nothing had ever happened. In a sterile recovery room, the bandaged young man known as Minato sat up in bed, his impossibly swift healing prompting an astonished observation that it was as if he had been healed by divine magic. It began with a quiet admission, as the thoughtful young man with dark hair and piercing purple eyes explained that his body could heal itself through the extraordinary power of divine magic. From the white void of a fractured memory, a single, panicked question suddenly emerged, demanding to know if he had truly mentioned a car accident. In the sterile confines of an examination room, a concerned Minato interrupted his checkup to ask if he truly had no magic left, a bizarre question that left the attending staff utterly confused. A stark admission cut through the silence, revealing a past spent battling demons during the Great Calamity. The sterile air of the lab hung heavy with an unspoken tension as Minato and the older doctor, Mizuhara, met each other's deeply worried gaze. In a brightly lit room that felt cold and sterile, a concerned man in a lab coat began his questioning, asking the figure before him to state their name and what year they believed it to be. Awakening to an unfamiliar reality, a young man named Minato Ichikami looked forward with a curious yet disoriented expression, asking if the year was truly 1970. The sterile air of the hospital room felt heavy with concern as Minato sat on the bed, his confusion deepening while the doctor and nurse discussed the probable diagnosis of a memory disorder stemming from his accident. It began in a formless white void, where a disembodied voice cut through the silence to declare that his name was Minato Kusanagi. Clasping his hands with a look of grave concern, a gray-haired man named Mizuhara leaned in to deliver a startling piece of information. It was, in fact, the year 2022. In the disorienting aftermath, a single, jarring thought echoed through his mind as he grappled with the realization that he was now Minato Kusanagi. Awakening to a world he no longer recognized, Minato's purple eyes widened in shocked disbelief as he struggled to comprehend that it was now the year 2022. Meanwhile, in an observation room, a pensive doctor named Mizuhara watched the boy's bewildered reaction on a monitor, remarking to a nearby nurse that he didn't seem to be lying. Stumbling into a world beyond his own, Minato's gaze fell upon a sleek screen where an image flickered with impossible clarity, and he marveled aloud at its thinness, questioning if it could truly be a television. Staring at a desk calendar marked with festive Halloween decorations, Minato was struck by the surreal and undeniable realization that the year was truly 2022. As a small, unfamiliar device cast a faint glow, Mizuhara broke the silence to ask a surprised Minato what it was, admitting she had never seen anything like it before. Stunned by her question about the unfamiliar device, a look of dawning horror crossed Minato's face as he sat up, stammering out if he could possibly be in the future. In a moment of quiet clarification, Minato gestured with an open palm, explaining that the calamity they spoke of was a distant memory, having ended 50 years in the past without ever threatening them again. In the quiet of a modern hospital room, a disoriented Minato sat up to question the staff, only to learn that the great calamities had long since passed and the world was now a peaceful place where demons were but a rarity. In a moment of shattering realization, Minato confronted the horrifying possibility that if what he had just heard was true, the world was not at peace at all. As the crushing weight of a recent ordeal finally lifted, Minato's face softened into a smile of profound relief, his eyes closing as he murmured his thanks for the merciful outcome. The world remembered Minato Ichikami as the hero who sacrificed his life to save it 50 years ago, yet here he was, bathed in the light of magical circles as he reached for a colossal, ethereal power. The tense silence of the room was broken as the doctor, with a look of grave concern, clasped his hands and asserted that the individual before him was not Minato Ichikami. The story began with a stark, chilling confession, the voice revealing that it had died back then. This chilling revelation forced him to wonder if he had then been reincarnated as Minato Kusanagi, 50 years after his supposed death. The shocking revelation shattered the silence, leaving only the jagged, echoing questions of how this was possible and why it had to happen. A serene blue sky stretched to the horizon, its calm expanse marked only by gentle clouds and the faint whisper of distant energy. A few weeks passed under a deceptively calm sky, the world settling into a quiet reprieve beneath the warm sun. The day began under a clear, bright sky, where a towering building stood sentinel over the quiet streets, its windows reflecting the morning light. The story began as Minato, a backpack slung over his shoulder, crossed the threshold into a bare room that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. A quiet contemplation settled over a dark-haired young man as he stood in a sparsely furnished room, slowly coming to terms with the fact that this was no longer just Minato Kusanagi's house, but his own. The mission began in a quiet moment of intense concentration as Minato, a young man with striking purple eyes, meticulously reviewed the critical details on his clipboard. The shadows of Minato's past stretched long, beginning with the loss of his parents as a child and passing through a brief adoption before culminating in the solitary independence he's known since high school. Examining the financial ledger, Minato realized that the man was simply living off the inheritance his parents had left behind. Lying casually on his bed, a young man named Minato gazed up at the book he was reading, concluding with certainty that there was no such thing as reincarnation magic. This sudden certainty led him to a far more staggering question: was his own reincarnation than the will of God? A student ID card from Kamui Magic Academy came into view, revealing the identity of Minato Kusanagi and raising the silent question of whether this was all just pure chance. The name of the institution echoed in his mind as he grappled with the unbelievable notion of a magic academy. The mystery began with a single, impossible artifact, the Kamui Magic Academy student ID of Minato Kusanagi, from an era when such things supposedly did not exist. Watching the revelation of his own artifact unfold on a small device, Minato simply leaned back with a smug smirk, finding the situation deeply interesting. The quiet moment was shattered by the insistent buzzing of a phone in a nearby bag, causing Minato to look down in curious surprise. He pulled out the phone, his brow furrowing as he read the unfamiliar name, Jun Tadano, and questioned who it could be. In a vast, empty expanse, a voice echoed with genuine curiosity, pondering aloud how the strange new power was meant to be used. In a moment of quiet contemplation, Minato sat on the ground, his face illuminated by the glow of his smartphone as he silently absorbed the information on its screen. The moment began not with a scene, but with a sound, an exasperated shout from just out of sight, as someone decided to simply dismiss it all. Seated alone and consumed by frustration, Minato tossed his phone away, letting the incoming call from Jun Tadano ring unanswered. The quiet of the moment was shattered by the sharp thud of a smartphone, its screen flaring to life with an incoming call. His quiet recovery from the hospital was abruptly shattered by a text message demanding his immediate return to school, its sender bluntly declaring they were running low on money. The day dawned with deceptive tranquility, a vast, bright blue sky stretching over a world unaware of what was to come. That deceptive sky now looked down upon the bustling grounds of a grand academy, where Minato and Mizuhara found themselves immersed in the lively energy of the student body. Bathed in the morning sun, Minato strolled onto the sprawling campus of a grand institution, murmuring with curiosity that this must be the famed Kamui Magic Academy. Clad once more in a student's uniform, Minato began his surreal return to school with the quiet, ironic thought that he never expected to be back as a grown-up. Bathed in the bright morning light before the school, Minato gazed into the distance, a quiet sense of excitement stirring within him. From a distance, Minato's purple eye narrowed with apprehension, a single bead of sweat tracing his temple as he silently questioned the peculiar sight before him. The air itself seemed to split with a powerful whoosh as the determined green-haired mage, Minato, unleashed his arcane might, conjuring a blazing orange orb within a complex, shimmering circle. In the quiet of the training grounds, Minato's observation was shattered by a concussive blast as Mizuhara unleashed an incredible force, making him wonder if what he was seeing was truly magic. Minato's voice cut through the tense air with a desperate warning about their opponent's staggering magic levels, his anxious expression mirrored by the looks of shock and alarm on the other students' faces. A pensive silence settled over Minato as he watched the green-haired student walk away, flanked by two imposing figures whose shadowy forms pulsed with a mysterious, glowing energy. As two men looked on with growing concern, Minato's composure shattered, and he clutched his head in anguish while crying out at how pathetic everything felt. As the world itself seemed to dissolve into a stark, empty whiteness, a single, desperate plea echoed in the silence, begging that this unfolding nightmare wasn't real. In the charged silence following a display of magic, a voice dripped with disdain, proclaiming the performance to be worse than that of any novice from their time. In a moment of pure disbelief, a sweating Minato clutched his hands and raged at how those brats could ever call themselves mages, his outburst met only by Mizuhara's confused stare from behind. Amidst the carefree bustle of campus life, a troubled Minato walked alone with his thoughts, wondering if the unsettling quiet meant the long-held peace was about to break. A furious, unseen voice shattered the tense silence, declaring that what had just transpired was utterly unacceptable. It began with a sound, a sudden, sharp rattle that shook the wooden door of classroom 2A and hinted at an imminent disturbance. Stepping into the unfamiliar classroom, Minato observed the indifferent faces of his new classmates and quietly concluded that the empty desk before him was his. Seated amidst the blur of unfamiliar faces in his new classroom, Minato found the thrill of reliving his past giving way to a hopeful thought as he wondered if he might make any friends here. Their quiet walk was violently interrupted as a dark scooter swerved dangerously close, and Minato's sharp cry of warning cut through the air. Shattering the campus quiet, two furious students cornered Minato, demanding he learn his place for the audacity of ignoring their texts. The air grew still as a young man named Minato glanced back, his cautious purple eyes demanding to know the identity of the person who had just appeared. The air, thick with unspoken threats, was suddenly torn apart by a sharp snapping sound, the shock of it echoing in the intense, wide-eyed gaze of Minato. That shock instantly hardened into cold fury as his leg snapped forward, sending the hooligan hurtling through a shower of splintered wood as Minato fiercely questioned if his opponent truly didn't know who he was. The tense quiet of the school was shattered when a furious, red-haired student jabbed an accusing finger at the stoic Minato, screaming that he was good for nothing. A call from Jun Tadano lit up Minato's phone, sparking a joyful realization as he pointed at the screen and excitedly declared that he finally remembered his friend. Stepping forward with a menacing smirk, the red-haired leader of three figures in matching white uniforms extended a hand, tauntingly asking the fool before them if he remembered now. His tone then shifted into a clear command, rhetorically asking if the boy understood what he was now expected to do. Amidst the hallway chatter, a beaming Minato seized the hand of a startled, red-haired student, enthusiastically declaring that they were all going to get along. The red-haired student's surprise instantly twisted into indignation as he yanked his hand away, shouting that Minato had it all wrong. The tense silence was violently broken by an unseen figure's raw, desperate demand for money. In a sudden flash of aggression, a red-haired hooligan lunged forward, yanking Minato close by his tie and demanding to know if his parents had left him a fortune. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place, leading one of them to voice the grim realization that Minato Kusanagi had likely been bullied at school. It began with a moment of stunned silence, shattered as Minato, a young man in a crisp white and blue uniform, clutched his tie with a sharp cry of disbelief. The confrontation exploded into violence as the red-haired hooligan lunged forward, roaring in fury at his opponent for daring to talk back. The tense classroom atmosphere was suddenly shattered by the arrival of a cheerful Mizuhara, who offered a bright greeting, seemingly unaware of the brewing conflict. The day began with a sparkle of light, introducing the impossibly cheerful Mizuhara, a blue-haired student whose radiant smile lit up the scene. In a dazzling moment of pure joy, Mizuhara's face lit up with a radiant smile that seemed to make the very air around her sparkle. The brilliance of her smile was met by the silent, steady glow of the star-shaped badge pinned prominently on Minato's uniform. It began with a soft, ethereal glow, revealing a serene figure standing poised in a white and purple skirt. Against a backdrop of giddy pink bubbles, a flustered yet bold Minato made his move, playfully pulling on the tie of a stoic and resolutely unimpressed Mizuhara. The tense aftermath of their confrontation hung in the air, broken only when the furious, red-haired hooligan pointed a trembling finger at Minato and vowed he would get him next time. A sense of weary resignation washed over Minato as he adjusted his tie, his gaze drawn to the all-too-familiar sight of two students causing a commotion by kicking a door down the hall. The day's lesson began with a somber lecture on the Great Calamity, its history, and the name of the great sage Minato Ichikami, filling the classroom chalkboard. His hand then purposefully scrawled the word sacrifice onto the green surface, followed by a cryptic instruction to add a new letter. It began in a sunlit classroom, where a teacher's grave lecture on the final, Great Calamity was met with the profound indifference of students like Minato, who were lost in afternoon daydreams. It was an age of despair, when demons poured into the world and all hope seemed lost, until a being of pure, celestial light erupted from the encroaching darkness. Amidst a crackling aura of raw, vibrant power, the legend of the first mage, the great sage Minato Ichikami, began, for he was fundamentally different from all who would follow. As the very air around him began to crackle with power, Minato raised his hand, unleashing a blinding vortex of intricate magical sigils. As the story of a hero's lone stand against the demons reached its tragic conclusion, a selfless sacrifice to vanquish the demon god, Mizuhara's expression grew serious while Minato's gaze fell, burdened by the weight of the past. The tale begins in an era of fragile peace, with a voice recounting that ever since a pivotal past event, no calamities had occurred. As the teacher's question about the identity of Minato Ichikami filled the classroom, an eager student named Yuka Mizuha immediately raised her hand and was called upon to answer. With a faint smile, Mizuhara began to reveal the monumental legacy of the man who established Kamui Magic Academy, a legendary figure revered as both the pioneer of magic and the only mage to have survived the first calamity. The world seemed to pause as Mizuhara turned, her expression captured in a moment of sheer wonder, with a gentle smile playing on her lips and a universe of delight sparkling in her eyes. In a world defined by magic, the story began with a singular legend, a man so revered that he was hailed by all mages as the hero of their world. A disembodied voice cut through an abstract void to confirm a staggering truth: he was the sole survivor of the first calamity and, more impossibly, the very first human to wield the power of magic. In a sun-drenched classroom, a teacher's lecture droned on, unheard by students lost in a haze of midday boredom and sleep. The school's entire existence was dedicated to a singular, monumental purpose: to forge more mages in the image of a legendary figure, once hailed as the greatest of them all. It began with a voice shouting from a blank void, first issuing a fierce warning and then a desperate plea for all to remember this moment. In the blinding white void of unconsciousness, a single, desperate plea echoed through the silence. The echo coalesced into a single, agonized shriek, begging for the torment to stop. In the quiet of the classroom, Minato sat paralyzed at his desk, a hot, sweating blush consuming his face as he burst out that the situation was utterly embarrassing. He collapsed onto his desk under the weight of it all, despairing that he had never anticipated being tortured in this way. Surrounded by the unfamiliar faces and echoing halls of his new school, Minato was suddenly struck by the overwhelming thought that his decision to attend had been a terrible mistake. However, his overwhelming doubt was immediately challenged by the memory of a doctor's words, a steely determination hardening in his gaze. In the quiet aftermath, a single, solemn thought echoed through the stillness, affirming that the world was now truly at peace. But a dissenting voice suddenly cut through the silence, demanding to know if this peace was the true cause of the mage's weakness. Inside a sunlit classroom, the quiet lecture faded into the background as Minato, lost in thought, watched two small birds chirp and flutter past the window. Within a silent, endless expanse of white, two ethereal forms drifted in a state of pure, undisturbed peace. The afternoon sun streamed into the classroom, illuminating a pensive Minato as he stared out the window, his thoughts lost in the endless expanse of the clear blue sky. A sudden, sharp ding shattered the silence, heralding an unseen but pivotal event. It began with a sound, a distinct chime that suddenly cut through the white emptiness, signaling a pivotal moment. The chime resolved into the school bell, prompting the teacher to announce that class was dismissed for the day, an announcement that held Minato's full attention while Mizuhara was already absorbed by her phone. It began with a stark announcement. A magic level assessment was set for the following day, a declaration that was immediately met with thoughtful contemplation. Surrounded by a group of jeering hooligans, Minato sat calmly at his desk as their red-haired leader leaned in close, expressing his eagerness to see just how low his magic level would be. Trapped in the monotony of a school day, Minato's thoughts soured with annoyance as he silently questioned whether the person in front of him had any purpose other than to be a constant irritation. The air grew thick with tension as a red-haired hooligan cruelly suggested that Minato's parents were lowlives, his taunt met only by the ominous purple aura beginning to pulse from the boy's defiant, turned back. A voice cut through the stark silence, feigning a sudden memory as it cruelly reminded its target of their orphanhood before dissolving into derisive laughter. Amidst the cruel laughter of three classmates, Minato stood with his head bowed, enduring the sting of public humiliation. The simmering confrontation between Minato and the red-haired hooligans finally boiled over as he stepped forward, his voice dripping with contempt as he called them filthy scum. Against a backdrop radiating pure fury, the red-haired hooligan clenched his fist and roared, demanding to know what had just been said and how anyone dared to talk back to him. From the depths of an absolute darkness, a fiery cataclysm erupted, forging a dark, elongated sigil that began to glow with an intense and mysterious purple script. Amidst the chaos of a room being violently torn apart, Minato rose into the air, engulfed by a furious, fiery aura and a powerful magical sigil as he confronted the stunned Mizuhara. The sheer force of his magical display sent the other students reeling, their faces a mask of terror as they questioned aloud if he was truly unleashing such power inside the classroom. In a sudden, blinding flash, a powerful flare of energy erupted, momentarily erasing the world in its overwhelming brilliance. A glowing magic circle erupted from his outstretched hand as he, consumed by fury, roared for the piece of trash to die. It began with a blinding flash of golden magic, a swirling vortex of power coalescing under the light of a mysterious sigil. In the next instant, that swirling vortex erupted, unleashing a colossal pillar of raw power that blasted upwards through the darkness. The confrontation was over in an instant as Minato, with quiet confidence, unleashed a cataclysmic blast of fiery energy that sent his terrified opponents scrambling for their lives. As the world dissolved into a blur of fiery energy, a panicked voice screamed out a desperate warning. In a blinding flash of fiery magic, an aggressive hooligan spell sent Mizuhara reeling backward, all while Minato watched the confrontation with unnerving calm. Standing with an unshakable calm, Minato faced forward as a colossal vortex of pure, fiery energy manifested behind him, its intensity a stark contrast to his own serene focus. It began with a deafening roar, as a colossal explosion tore through the silence and consumed everything in a wall of fire. This wall of fire then churned into a brilliant maelstrom of raw, golden energy that seemed to warp the very air itself. The world fractured in a silent, overwhelming explosion of raw power, tearing reality apart with searing streaks of fiery energy. The story begins not in quiet contemplation, but in a sudden, blinding flash as a cataclysmic explosion rips through the world with a deafening roar. The world erupted in a blinding flash of energy, and in that chaotic moment, a furious Mizuhara lunged toward Minato, her knife poised to strike as he recoiled in shock. The nature of that blinding energy became horrifyingly apparent as an onlooker screamed that he was using magic in a fight. It began in a blinding flash of orange energy, where a terrified Mizuhara felt Minato's unseen hand suddenly grasp hers in the swirling smoke. Stepping out from the dissipating smoke, her initial terror gave way to fierce defiance as she declared that this would not end well for her opponent. The air in the hallway crackled with tension as Minato, a fiery-haired student, thrust an accusatory finger forward, vehemently denying any fault by insisting the other boy had started it. The argument was cut short by a sudden, concussive blast that filled the hallway with a cloud of obscuring smoke. It began with a subtle waft of air in a hazy hall, where a vast, shadowy presence started to coalesce from the ether. That ethereal presence, carried on a gentle current, then wafted into an empty, sunlit classroom, disturbing the quiet stillness. In the aftermath of a devastating event, Minato, Mizuhara, and their companion stood frozen in awe, watching a colossal cloud of dust and debris billow ominously into the sky. In the aftermath of some unseen event, a dense fog of smoke rolled through the room, nearly concealing the silent figures of Minato and Mizuhara. As a dramatic sound cut through the air, a composed young man named Minato emerged from a swirl of smoke, his pristine white uniform and determined gaze immediately seizing control of the scene. The ordinary quiet of the hallway was shattered in an instant, leaving Mizuhara wide-eyed with shock as Minato gasped in surprise just behind her. The day began with a quiet moment of resignation, as a lone voice conceded that there was simply nothing to be done. In the hallowed halls of the academy, a young man named Minato, distinguished by his crisp uniform and thoughtful purple eyes, turned his gaze towards something just out of sight. Staggering in shock, the blue-haired mage could only stammer in disbelief, questioning how his opponent was still standing after being struck by his magic. A wave of confusion and alarm washed over Minato as he demanded to know what was happening, his companion looking on in shared shock. In response to their shared shock, the companion clarified that first-tier magic could easily be blocked by a simple barrier. His striking purple eyes flashing with supreme confidence, the young man known as Minato asserted that he wouldn't even need to use magic. Against the unsettling purple glow of the hallway, Minato towered over two terrified students, his voice low as he reminded them that he had only let their transgressions slide because they were just children. The mundane calm of the school hallway was shattered in an instant, causing Minato and his friends to flinch back in shared, sudden terror. Against a shadowy void, a brilliant surge of blue and purple energy erupted with a powerful roar, scattering shimmering particles into the darkness. From an unknown source, a torrent of swirling purple and blue energy burst forth, heralding a moment of immense and terrible power. The air crackled as a storm of blue lightning erupted around Minato, who stood firm with a clenched fist, his face a mask of resolute power. It began with a low thrum that quickly swelled into a powerful surge, unleashing a torrent of glowing blue energy that swirled through the void. On a glowing platform that shimmered with ethereal energy, Mizuhara and Minato stood transfixed before an overwhelming surge of power, their faces a mixture of awe and steely determination. In a sudden flash of glowing blue particles, Mizuhara and Minato found themselves frozen in place, crying out in alarm as they questioned the mysterious force that had trapped them. The quiet moment was shattered when a mysterious glow erupted around Mizuhara, who cried out in confusion as she desperately tried to understand the magical phenomenon unfolding before her. It began in the oppressive darkness, where a mysterious power suddenly ignited, swirling into a vibrant flame of ethereal purple energy. It began with a blinding flash, unleashing a chaotic storm of crackling purple energy that tore through the silence with a deafening roar. From the heart of that chaotic storm, Minato strode forward with grim determination, the raw power now coalescing into a vibrant aura around him. The tense standoff between Minato and Mizuhara finally broke as he stepped forward, the ground around them crackling with a surge of electric energy. The air itself seemed to fracture as Minato, his eyes blazing with an inner light, reached forward with a silent command, summoning crackling energy to his outstretched hand. In a moment of sheer, unadulterated terror, a young uniformed man named Minato began to tremble, his wide eyes reflecting a horror that left him sweating and paralyzed. That moment of terror was abruptly shattered by an older man in a business suit, who burst in demanding to know what the noise was and who had dared to use magic. A sharp, commanding voice suddenly shattered the silence, demanding an immediate explanation. In the midst of a tense classroom discussion, Minato gestured with unwavering resolve, his sudden assertiveness leaving a red-haired classmate utterly surprised. A heavy sigh escaped Minato's lips, his gaze falling downward as the weight of the moment settled upon him. In a room thick with tension, a subordinate's voice cut through the silence, offering the hollow assurance that nothing had happened. As a mysterious disturbance shook the building from outside, a cheerful young man named Minato offered a simple theory with an amused smile, suggesting that someone might have been using magic. A voice immediately clarified that, as far as they were aware, the Magic Club had no activities scheduled outside that day. Inside a sunlit room, the investigation continued as Minato, gesturing thoughtfully toward an older man, offered his theory that the person responsible was not a member of the Magic Club. It began with an unseen observer's voice, which first mused on the predictable haste of mages to use magic before turning its analytical focus to the lingering smoke. In the bright light of the classroom, Minato smiled as he pointed toward the window, explaining that the sound had come from outside, a claim his companion accepted with thoughtful reluctance. Pointing forward with resolute authority, Minato vowed that he would catch the culprit himself before commanding everyone to head home. It began with a heavy sense of foreboding, a single thought echoing through a weary mind that the last thing it needed was more trouble. While Mizuhara and the other students stared up in stunned silence, Minato beamed with carefree confidence, flashing a peace sign as he cheerfully decided he would deal with covering things up later. It began in the profound quiet, a barely audible murmur that seemed to rise from the silence itself. Amidst a rising murmur, Mizuhara clasped her hands in deep concern, a bead of sweat on her face as a flustered Minato lingered just behind her. Ignoring the seething glare from the red-haired figure behind him, Minato stood unbothered as a furious curse was hurled at his name. Watching from the shadows, an unseen figure assessed the group with a sharp sense of unease, noting that their power levels were critically low, even for students. A heavy silence hung in the air until Minato, a student whose serious expression betrayed a deep-seated concern, finally asked whether mages were currently out in the world hunting demons. As a deceptive quiet settled over the scene, a dark and insistent thought pierced the tranquility, certain that even in this apparent peace, demons were still prowling somewhere nearby. In the quiet stillness of the school, a pensive Minato stood alone, his serious expression hardening as he resolved to go and see for himself what was happening. A somber quiet settled over Shibuya's old town, where the story begins beneath a heavy, clouded sky. Under the oppressive weight of a cloudy night sky, a desolate city lay in ruins, its skeletal towers choked by debris and reclaimed by a somber, encroaching silence. Suddenly, this somber silence was shattered as a hooded figure named Minato streaked across the sky, propelled by a vibrant disk of green energy that cast an otherworldly glow against the full moon. It began in the heart of the desolate throne room, where the echo of a solitary footstep announced a challenger's audacious arrival. With that audacious step, a brilliant blue aura surged upwards from the cold stone floor, crackling with raw power around his feet. A brilliant full moon hung in the silent night sky, bearing witness to the stark realization that Shibuya, too, had changed immensely. On a still night, beneath the silent watch of a full moon, a lone, masked figure named Minato stood enveloped in a brilliant blue aura, his intense purple eyes hinting at the immense power contained within. Deep within the oppressive silence, a low groan echoed as the very ground began to split apart, its fresh cracks illuminated by a faint, eerie blue light from an unseen source. The air itself crackled with raw power as Minato, with a single determined stomp, activated a luminous green magical circle that flared to life beneath his foot. A sudden flash of green energy ripped through the moonlit darkness, its twin trails a testament to a breathtaking burst of speed. The air crackled with raw power as Minato descended, a glowing green magic circle erupting beneath his foot and casting an intense blue aura around his determined form. The hunt began in an eerie silence, the air thick with anticipation as the team's magic sensor reported that he could not yet detect a demonic presence. It began with a flash of emerald light, as a hooded figure named Minato propelled himself forward, his face a mask of fierce determination as he unleashed an incredible burst of speed. His speed was a blur through the wreckage, driven by the urgent question of whether the police were still hunting demons in such a ruined world. Cloaked in shadow and suddenly illuminated by a mystical blue aura, Minato froze, his head snapping to the side as he urgently declared that he could sense a demon's presence far from their position. He then added with a jolt of surprise that there was a human there as well. A deep rumble echoed through the stark, shadowy chamber as Minato unleashed a torrent of brilliant blue energy. In response, a pillar of brilliant green energy erupted to meet his, the resulting explosion thundering through the space. Standing at the heart of a maelstrom, Minato unleashed a torrent of raw magical energy, causing the glowing circle at his feet to erupt in pillars of blinding green light. A furious, animalistic growl tore through the darkness, revealing the spiky silhouette of Minato in the throes of a primal transformation. Trapped beneath the menacing shadows of two skeletal-faced figures, a terrified Mizuhara could only cower on the ground and desperately plead for them to stay away. The scene erupted in a blaze of red and orange as two monstrous, draconic heads with glowing crimson eyes unleashed a terrifying roar that seemed to shake the very air. The story began in a rain-soaked alley, where the silence was abruptly broken by the heavy thwomp of something, or someone, hitting the ground. In the charged silence of their confrontation, a brilliant green energy suddenly erupted from the masked figure of Minato, catching Mizuhara completely off guard as she could only watch in stunned disbelief. A monstrous roar tore through the air, radiating waves of furious energy. It began in a chaotic flash, the world dissolving into a vibrant, streaking blur of motion and raw energy. The confrontation exploded into violence as a grotesque, horned creature lunged at Minato, its skull-like maw opening to reveal a terrifying array of golden teeth and a sinister purple gem. The confrontation erupted in a blur of violent motion as three razor-sharp claws lunged forward with terrifying speed. The battle erupted in a flash of gold and purple, as a flurry of ornate daggers struck their unseen target with brutal, successive impacts. Trapped within a maelstrom of radiant purple energy, a monstrous, horned beast threw its head back and let out a soul-shattering roar of pure agony. Cutting through the creature's pained screams, a hooded Minato appeared between the sharp spires, unleashing a powerful torrent of golden energy. A dull flop echoed as the unseen form finally hit the ground. Amidst the shattered remains of monstrous skeletons, a mysterious figure named Minato emanated a powerful blue aura, standing as a triumphant guardian over the awestruck Mizuhara. A mysterious, hooded figure emerged from the shadows, his presence announced by a brilliant blue aura that illuminated a single, determined purple eye. A sudden, paralyzing terror gripped Mizuhara, her eyes widening in horror as she instinctively clutched at the uniform over her chest. It began in a hushed chamber, where an ornate artifact marked with a bold X lay revealed upon a dark, velvety surface. Amidst the tense standoff, a single, jagged thought cut through the confusion, questioning if the woman at the center of it all was secretly a police mage. A solemn warning to be careful echoed from a glowing blue abyss, shattering the stark, silent emptiness. In the suffocating darkness, a lone figure stood with his back turned, unleashing a torrent of brilliant blue energy that pulsed with mysterious power. That brilliant energy then converged into a glowing magic circle at his feet, prompting a stunned Mizuhara to look up and stammer out her thanks. From his high-rise window, the white-haired Minato watched in stunned disbelief as trails of vibrant green energy tore through the night sky, a single name of recognition escaping his lips. His certainty shattered, and in a state of utter confusion, he wondered aloud just who that mysterious figure could have been. A wave of apprehension washed over Mizuhara as she touched her chin in thought, forced to admit that the man she just faced was an undeniably skilled mage. But beyond his mere skill, a more chilling thought struck her: he had accomplished it all without needing to chant for any of his magic. Under the light of a full moon, Minato soared through the night sky, his hooded figure radiating a powerful blue aura and green mystical energy, confident that concealing his identity was the right move. As ethereal trails of cyan energy painted the night sky above the city's dark silhouette, a recently reincarnated soul resolved to live this new life in quiet obscurity. Enveloped by a mystical blue aura, Minato reflected on the woman's pathetic struggle against the demon, a clear sign to him that the entire police force must possess similarly low magic levels. The assessment came with a chilling finality, a stark declaration that with skills of that caliber, it was simply impossible for them to hunt demons. As the city descended into chaos, a grim thought surfaced, questioning the dire implications if both the students and the police were in such a compromised state. From this grim realization, Minato voiced a harsh conclusion: the chaos simply meant mages, as a whole, had grown weak. In the quiet that preceded the storm, Minato's face remained shrouded in shadow, save for the ghost of a calculated smirk that betrayed a hidden, unfolding agenda. That calculated smirk then bloomed into a full, confident smile, a silent confirmation of the resolve behind his unfolding agenda. A lone voice echoed through the cosmos, carrying the confident yet somber realization that the world once again needed their immense power. In answer to that cosmic plea, Minato stepped forward, his form suddenly bathed in an ethereal blue glow as two vibrant green magical circles flared to life beneath his feet. A resolute voice shattered the quiet of the starry night, declaring that their campaign would begin with cleansing the surrounding area of demons. The night erupted with mystical energy as a cloaked figure, Minato, tore through the star-dusted sky, his descent marked by a luminous, arcane circle. A quiet night settled over the city, its rooftops silhouetted against a dark blue sky where faint stars drifted, oblivious to the events about to unfold. In the desolate heart of a forgotten metropolis, the skeletal remains of skyscrapers reached silently toward a deep blue, starless night.